Aunt Helen, let's be honest. You're sweet, but you're never going to marry anyone good-looking because, well, look at you. My nephew Brandon slurred, gesturing at my simple navy dress with his champagne flute while his groomsmen laughed. I smiled politely, excused myself to the bathroom, and sent a quick text to the person waiting in the parking lot. Change of plans, come in now. 20 minutes later, when I walked back into the reception with my date, Brandon dropped his champagne glass, the crystal shattering on the marble floor as he stared at the internationally famous supermodel whose hand was interlaced with mine. The Riverside Country Club had never seen a wedding quite like Brandon's. My sister Gloria had spent 18 months planning every detail, from the imported orchids to the 7-tier cake that cost more than most people's cars. Brandon was her only child, her golden boy who'd grown up believing his trust fund made him untouchable and his prep school education made him wise. I'd watched him evolve from a sweet kid who used to beg me to read him bedtime stories into a 28-year-old man who rated women on spreadsheets and called it maintaining standards. His bride, Madison, was exactly what he'd ordered, blonde, thin, from the right family, with the right degree from the right sorority. She laughed at his jokes about unfortunate-looking people, and nodded when he explained why physical appearance was evolutionarily essential to a good marriage. I'd arrived at the wedding alone, as usual. At 35, I'd grown comfortable with my role as the singleton at family events. I was Helen the pediatric surgeon, Helen the reliable one, Helen who bought the best gifts but never brought a date. My appearance had never been Hollywood, average height, athletic build from years of hospital shifts, features that were pleasant but unremarkable. I'd made peace with it years ago, finding validation in saving lives rather than turning heads. The ceremony had been beautiful in that sterile way expensive weddings often are. Madison floated down the aisle looking like a bridal magazine cover. Brandon waited at the altar with the kind of smirk that suggested he'd won a prize, and Gloria cried perfectly timed tears that didn't disturb her makeup. At the reception, I'd claimed a spot at the singles table, a collection of cousins, college friends, and other relatives deemed officially unpaired. I was enjoying my salmon and making conversation with Brandon's former roommate when the groom himself approached, whiskey heavy on his breath. "Aunt Helen," he boomed, pulling up a chair. "Having fun at the kids' table? It's lovely, Brandon. You and Madison look very happy." "We are. We're perfect for each other. Both successful, both attractive, both from good families. That's how you build a lasting marriage, compatibility on all levels, especially the visual one." His groomsmen had gathered around by then, sensing entertainment. Brandon had always performed better with an audience. "You know," he continued, leaning in conspiratorially, "Madison and I were just talking about you the other day. About how you're still single. How thoughtful of you to be concerned," I replied, recognizing the trap but unable to avoid it. "Well, of course we're concerned. You're 35, Aunt Helen. The clock is ticking. And let's be honest, you're sweet but you're never going to marry anyone good-looking because, well, look at you." He gestured at my appearance like a game show host revealing a disappointing prize. "You're like, what, a 6 on a good day? Maybe a 7 with makeup? Guys who are 8s and above, they're shopping in a different store, you know what I mean." His groomsmen chuckled. One of them, slightly less drunk, looked uncomfortable but said nothing. "I mean, Uncle Frank is probably more your speed," Brandon continued, referencing Gloria's twice-divorced brother, who collected DUIs like baseball cards. "Similar attractiveness level. You should be realistic about your options." I felt the familiar burn of humiliation mixed with anger, but I'd learned long ago that engaging with Brandon when he was in performance mode only made things worse. Instead, I smiled the same smile I used when telling parents their child needed surgery. "You make some interesting points, Brandon. If you'll excuse me, I need to use the ladies' room." I walked calmly to the bathroom, locked myself in a stall, and pulled out my phone. The text I'd been avoiding sending all night suddenly seemed necessary. "Marcus, still in the parking lot. Sure you don't want me to come in?" "Me, change of plans, come in now." "Marcus, everything okay?" "Me, perfect. Just decided I'm tired of hiding." "Marcus, give me 10 minutes. I need to fix my tie." Marcus Castellano and I had been together for 8 months, the most wonderful, complicated, surreal 8 months of my life. We'd met at a medical charity gala where he was the celebrity host, and I was one of the honored physicians. He'd spent the entire evening asking about my work with pediatric heart surgery, genuinely fascinated by the procedures I described. I'd spent the evening trying to forget that his face was currently on billboards in Times Square. Our relationship had been private by mutual choice. Marcus was tired of dating being a public spectacle, and I was protective of my normal life. We'd found a rhythm that worked. Quiet dinners at my apartment, hiking trips where he could wear a baseball cap and be anonymous, long conversations about everything except his fame. He'd attended my hospital's Christmas party as Helen's boyfriend who works in fashion, charming my colleagues without revealing he'd just walked in Paris Fashion Week. I'd told him about Brandon's wedding months ago, warned him about my family's dynamics. He'd offered to come, but I'd declined, not ready to handle the inevitable circus. Now, standing in that bathroom stall, I realized I'd been protecting the wrong things. I wasn't ashamed of Marcus. I was ashamed of being ordinary Helen who'd somehow attracted someone extraordinary. When I returned to the reception, I took a detour to the bar, ordering a club soda and positioning myself where I could see the entrance. Brandon had returned to his head table, regaling Madison and her bridesmaids with some story that required extensive hand gestures. Gloria was working the room, accepting compliments on the flowers and dropping the per-plate catering cost into every conversation. Then the doors opened and time seemed to slow. Marcus Castellano entered my nephew's wedding like he entered every room, as if light bent around him by choice. 6'3", wearing a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit that probably cost more than the average car, with the kind of bone structure that made photographers weep. But it wasn't just his looks that commanded attention. It was the way he moved, confident but not arrogant, aware of his impact but not enslaved by it. Heads turned in waves. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Madison's maid of honor literally gasped. Marcus scanned the room until his eyes found mine. Then his face transformed with a smile that belonged on magazine covers, but that I knew was just for me. He crossed the room with purposeful strides, ignoring the whispers and stares, until he reached me at the bar. "Hi, baby," he said softly, pulling me into a kiss that was tender enough for a wedding but thorough enough to make our relationship crystal clear. "Sorry I'm late. The GPS tried to take me to a golf course." "You're right on time," I murmured against his lips. When we broke apart, the entire reception was staring. Brandon had half risen from his chair, his mouth opening and closing like a fish. Gloria had frozen mid-conversation with the photographer. Madison was frantically Googling on her phone, probably trying to figure out why she recognized him. "Should we get you a drink?" I asked Marcus, taking his hand. "Lead the way." We walked to the bar together, his thumb stroking mine in that absent way he did when he was thinking. The bartender, a young woman who definitely recognized him, nearly dropped the bottle of champagne she was holding. "Champagne?" I asked Marcus. "Whatever you're having. 2 club sodas, please," I told the starstruck bartender. The whispers had started now, rippling through the reception like waves. "Is that Marcus Castellano? The model? The actual supermodel? What's he doing here? Oh my God, he kissed Helen." I felt Brandon approaching before I saw him, his cologne announcing his arrival like a herald. "Aunt Helen," he said, his voice pitched higher than usual. You brought someone?" "Oh yes. Brandon, this is Marcus." "Marcus, this is my nephew Brandon. It's his wedding." Marcus extended his hand with a genuine smile. "Congratulations. Beautiful ceremony. Your wife looks stunning." Brandon shook his hand mechanically, still staring. You're Marcus Castellano." "Guilty," Marcus said easily. "Though here I'm just Helen's boyfriend who's terrible at directions." "Boyfriend," Brandon repeated flatly. 8 months now," I supplied helpfully. "I know I should have mentioned it, but we've been keeping things private. You know how it is." 8 months, Brandon echoed. Madison had materialized at his side, her eyes wide. "Oh my God, you were in Italian Vogue last month. The Versace spread. That was a fun shoot," Marcus acknowledged politely before turning back to me. "Dance with me? I love this song." It was thinking out loud. Exactly the kind of generic wedding song Marcus would never claim to love. But I let him lead me to the dance floor anyway, aware of every eye following us. "So," he murmured as we swayed together, "want to tell me why we went from parking lot to grand entrance?" My nephew informed me I'm too ordinary to attract anyone good-looking. Marcus pulled back to look at me, his expression darkening. He said what? He was just being Brandon. Trust fund kid with too much whiskey and too little sense. "Helen." His hand tightened on my waist. "That's not okay." "I know. That's why I texted you. Petty. Maybe. Satisfying? Definitely." He spun me out and back, making my dress flare. You know what the ironic part is? He's got it backwards. I'm the one batting above my average. Marcus. No, I'm serious. You want to know what I thought the first time I saw you at that gala? Before we even talked, I looked up at him, curious despite myself. I thought, there's someone who knows who they are. You were explaining a surgical procedure to that pharmaceutical executive, and you were so passionate, so confident. You didn't care that your dress was simpler than everyone else's, or that you were the only woman not trying to flirt with me. You were just yourself. Do you know how rare that is in my world? So you're saying you fell for my explanation of arterial bypass grafts. I'm saying I fell for the woman who could make arterial bypass grafts sound like poetry and then roast me for not knowing the difference between veins and arteries. They're completely different colors, Marcus. How does anyone not know that? See? That right there. He dipped me suddenly, making me laugh. The way you look at me like I'm just some guy who needs to study anatomy textbooks, not like I'm an internationally famous supermodel who charges $50,000 a day? Something like that. The song ended, but neither of us moved to leave the floor. Around us, the reception had taken on a surreal quality. Some guests were openly taking photos. Gloria had cornered the wedding photographer, probably demanding he capture every moment. Brandon remained frozen at the bar, his perfect wedding derailed by his ordinary aunt's extraordinary date. We should probably mingle, I said eventually. Let everyone get it out of their system. What followed was the most entertaining hour of family interaction I'd ever experienced. Cousins who'd ignored me for years suddenly wanted to know everything about my life. Aunts who'd spent decades pitying poor single Helen were desperate for relationship advice. Madison's bridesmaids formed a hovering semicircle whenever Marcus moved, like planets orbiting the sun. Through it all, Marcus was perfect. He complimented Gloria's planning, chatted with my uncles about football, and let Madison's grandmother show him pictures of her cats. But his hand never left mine, and every few minutes he'd lean in to whisper commentary that made me bite back laughter. Your cousin Linda just asked if I do private modeling sessions. Should I tell her about my day rate? The groomsman with the SpongeBob tie clip won't stop flexing. I think he's trying to challenge me to an arm wrestling match. Your sister has mentioned the catering cost 17 times. We get it, Gloria, the salmon was expensive. Finally, inevitably, Brandon approached again. He'd sobered up somewhat, the reality of his situation settling in. Can I talk to you for a minute, Aunt Helen? Privately. I glanced at Marcus, who kissed my temple. I'll go admire the chocolate fountain. Don't let him upset you. Brandon led me to a quiet corner of the terrace. The fairy lights Gloria had insisted on cast everything in a soft glow that made Brandon look younger, more like the kid who used to ask me to check for monsters under his bed. I'm sorry, he said without preamble. What I said earlier, that was cruel. And drunk. And stupid. Yes, it was. I guess he struggled for words. You were supposed to be the cautionary tale, you know? The career woman who forgot to get married. Mom always used you as an example of what happens when women don't prioritize relationships. And now you show up with Marcus freaking Castellano, and I realize I don't know anything about anything. He laughed bitterly. You know what the really pathetic part is? Madison and I have been together for 3 years, and she's never looked at me the way he looks at you. I studied my nephew, really looked at him for the first time in years. Beneath the expensive suit and carefully styled hair was an insecure young man who'd been taught that life was about checking boxes and maintaining appearances. Brandon, can I give you some advice? Real advice, not Aunt Lecture advice. He nodded. Stop rating people. Stop categorizing them by their looks or their bank accounts or their social status. The best thing about Marcus isn't that he's handsome, though obviously that doesn't hurt. It's that he sees me, really sees me, not as a number on a scale or a role to fill, but as a person. How did you even meet him? He came to a medical charity event. Spent 3 hours asking about pediatric surgery. Did you know he's considering funding a new surgical wing at my hospital? Brandon's eyes widened. Seriously? Seriously. Turns out when you stop focusing on surfaces, you find depth. You might want to try it sometime. Starting with your wife. I left him on the terrace and found Marcus at the chocolate fountain, where he'd been cornered by my great-aunt Mildred. Ready to go? I asked. Already. He looked disappointed. Mildred was just telling me about her hip replacement. In graphic detail, I'm sure. We made our goodbyes, which took another 20 minutes and involved multiple selfie requests. As we finally escaped to the parking lot, I felt the tension of the evening dissolve. "Thank you," I said as we reached his car. "For coming in. For being wonderful. For not making a scene when Brandon basically called me ugly." "First of all," Marcus said, opening my door, "Brandon's an idiot. Second, you're beautiful. And third, I've been wanting to meet your family for months. Although next time, maybe we start with a smaller gathering." Next time, he came around to the driver's side and slid in beside me. "Helen, I've been in magazines and on runways since I was 17. Do you know how many people I've dated who introduced me to their families?" I shook my head. 0. They wanted to date Marcus the model, not Marcus the person. You're the first one who made me feel normal enough to want abnormal things. Like meeting your disaster of a family and pretending to like your nephew's wedding cake. The cake was terrible, wasn't it? So dry. How do you spend that much money on a cake and make it taste like sawdust? We laughed as he pulled out of the country club, leaving behind the fairy lights and the whispers and the shattered champagne glass Brandon never did clean up. My phone buzzed with texts. "Gloria, we need to talk about your secret boyfriend. Cousin Linda, get it girl. 2 hearts. Madison, can you get me on his Instagram?" I silenced it and reached for Marcus's hand. "No regrets?" he asked. "Only one," I admitted. "What's that?" "I should have brought you to family Thanksgiving. Can you imagine Gloria's face when you asked for dark meat?" His laughter filled the car, rich and warm in mine. The ordinary aunt and the extraordinary man, driving into the night, proving that the best love stories are the ones that shatter expectations like champagne flutes on marble floors.